where every word opens a new world. Welcome to the portal of stories.
There are places where faith turns to silence, where prayers echo unanswered, and where light struggles to hold its ground. San Elias is one of those places. What began as a settlement of the devout slowly became a cradle for forgotten things, secrets buried beneath stone, pacts whispered in the dark, and rituals passed down through generations too afraid to speak of them. Fallen Angels is not merely a story of good and evil. It is a descent into the heart of belief, where truth and madness intertwine, and redemption demands more than just confession. It follows three unlikely allies, Mateo, the skeptic, Elena, the marked, and Javier, the believer, as they unravel the layers of an ancient cult bound to the memory of celestial rebellion. Some stories are warnings, others are calls. This is both. Enter San Elias, but do so with your eyes open and your soul guarded, because not all those who fall stay buried.
The fog fell thick over San Elias like a curtain of ancient tears, veiling the outlines of houses and leaving only the faint glow of rusty street lamps visible along the cobbled streets. Every stone, every twisted tree seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared to listen. That night, the wind carried the scent of wet earth and something else. A foul, barely perceptible trace that chilled the blood. Mateo Cruz walked briskly, clutching the books he had taken from the old municipal library. His footsteps echoed in the solitude of dusk, accompanied by the crackling of branches breaking under invisible steps. It was his first week in San Elias, and though he tried to rationalize every sound, every strange shadow, an ever-growing unease had settled in his chest. When he arrived at his modest home on the edge of the forest, something at the threshold stopped him cold. The mutilated corpse of a fox laid out within a circle of black stones. On its bloodied fur were symbols drawn with a dark pigment, twisted and foreign to any logic Mateo knew. "What the hell?" he whispered, swallowing hard. That same night, Mateo called the only two friends he had made in town, Elena Morales and Javier Salinas. Elena, with dark hair and a distant gaze, had lived in San Elias her entire life, though she rarely spoke of her past. Javier, on the other hand, was a former seminarian, a student of ancient scriptures who had returned to care for his ailing mother. When they arrived, Elena knelt beside the dead fox, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the symbols. "This isn't new," she murmured, avoiding Mateo's eyes. This has happened before." Mateo frowned. "No way! There has to be an explanation. Some sick prankster, maybe a pagan rite by bored teens." Javier, however, stepped closer, his face pale and brow furrowed. "They're not pranksters, they're warnings." That night, as the fog thickened and house lights dimmed one by one, the three friends gathered in Mateo's kitchen. On the table, they spread out old books and scattered notes. Javier flipped through a dusty volume on religious symbolism. "This," he said, pointing to an image nearly identical to the one found on the animal, "is a banishment sigil. It was used to seal fallen entities." Mateo let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, Javier, you don't really believe in that stuff." "I believe in what I see," Javier replied gravely. "And this is just the beginning." From deep within the forest came the sound of something breaking, not the natural crackle of wind-blown branches, but something heavier, something walking. Elena quickly shut the window. Mateo tried to laugh again, but the sound died in his throat. San Elias whispered, and without knowing it, they had just heard the first call. At dawn, the town of San Elias seemed to have forgotten the horrors of the previous night. Residents opened their doors, swept their sidewalks, and greeted each other with tense smiles, clinging to routine so as not to fall into the lurking madness. Mateo, Elena, and Javier met in the town square, next to the cracked fountain where, according to the elders, Saint Michael had once defeated a demon centuries ago. The air was heavy with moisture, and the sun's rays barely managed to pierce the lingering fog. "We need to go to the church," Javier said firmly. "Something is hidden there. Something that doesn't want to be found." Mateo scoffed, crossing his arms. "Right. And I suppose we'll find ghosts and portals to hell too?" Elena said nothing. She simply stared at the dark silhouette of St. Michael's Church, standing out against the leaden sky. A stab of forgotten memories pierced her mind. A damp crypt chanting in an unknown tongue, eyes glowing in the dark. Driven by a need for answers, they crossed the square and climbed the slick stone steps to the main entrance. The wooden doors, carved with scenes of the celestial battle, creaked ominously as they opened. Inside, the church was a maze of shadows and echoes. The light from the stained glass windows, pale and distorted, cast multicolored patches on the dusty pews. An elderly man in a black cassock approached them. "Father Salvador," Javier whispered. "I didn't know there was a new priest." The old man smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Faith always needs its guardians," he rasped. "Welcome to the Lord's house." Mateo exchanged a skeptical glance with Elena. Something about the man sent a chill down his spine, a sense of danger lurking behind the priest's kindly facade. "We'd like to see the old archives," Javier said. "Documents about the town's founders, records of anomalies." Father Salvador hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded. "San Elias has known trials and tribulations. But remember, some doors once opened cannot be closed." He led them to a back room where rickety shelves towered to the ceiling, packed with dust-covered tomes. As the priest withdrew, Javier dove into the books eagerly. "Here it is," he murmured, pulling out a cracked leather-bound volume. "The Last Judgment of San Elias." Mateo flipped through the pages, his skepticism wavering at the accounts of rebel angels, blood-sealed pacts, and a cult devoted to the fallen children of the heavens. Suddenly, Elena stopped in front of a deteriorated painting on the wall. A depiction of the archangel Michael, battling grotesque figures falling from the sky, their faces hidden beneath veils of shadow. A nearly erased phrase ran along the frame. "And he who breaks the seal shall unleash the wrath of the forgotten." A chill ran down Elena's spine. From the far end of the church, a sharp sound echoed, like an unseen force slamming a door shut. And in that instant, they knew they were not alone. Night fell over San Elias like a shroud, smothering the town in unnatural silence. Elena walked alone through the deserted streets, unable to shake the image of the painting from her mind. Every shadow seemed to move. Every dark corner whispered her name. When she arrived at her house, she found the door ajar. Her heart skipped a beat. Cautiously, she pushed it open and stepped inside. Everything was just as she had left it, except for one detail. On the dining table was an old framed photograph she didn't remember placing there. She approached and looked at it closely. It was a black and white image of a group of people standing in front of the church many years ago. In the center was a little girl, blindfolded. A tremor passed through her as she recognized something familiar in the child. It was her. A soft murmur, almost imperceptible, rose from the walls. Words in an unknown language filled the room. Elena backed away until she hit the door. "Stop!" she shouted, and the echo of her voice seemed to silence the whispers. She grabbed the photo and ran to Mateo's house, banging frantically on the door until he opened it, startled. "What's going on?" he asked. Breathless, she showed him the picture. Mateo frowned. "This doesn't make sense. You look 5 or 6 years old here. I don't remember any of this, Elena whispered. But something is forcing me to remember. Javier arrived shortly after, summoned urgently. He examined the photograph and went pale. It's an initiation ceremony, he said quietly. A forbidden ritual. The cult sealed a vow of silence with the children. Mateo closed his eyes, trying to rationalize. This could be anything. A fake, a sick joke. But Elena shook her head. I was there, I know it. I feel it in every fiber of my being. A tremor passed through the house and rattled the windows. Outside, the fog began to swirl, as if something invisible was walking through it. Javier crossed himself. They've awakened, and they're looking for us. From the thick mist, 3 hooded figures watched the house, motionless as statues. And though their faces were hidden, all 3 friends knew they were smiling. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was warning of the evil brewing beneath it. The entire town seemed wrapped in a strange lethargy. Empty streets, shuttered shops, windows hidden behind opaque curtains. Mateo, Elena, and Javier gathered once more, this time in the abandoned cafe across from the plaza. Javier laid several old books and documents on the table, texts he had recovered from the church archives. San Elias wasn't always a town, he explained in a hushed tone. Originally, it was a settlement founded by religious exiles who believed in the redemption of fallen angels. They wanted to open a new heaven. Mateo clenched his fists. That's fanaticism, madness. Javier ignored him. The cult never truly vanished. It just went underground, waiting for the right time to act. Meanwhile, Elena stared out the window. She watched the townspeople, now transformed, expressionless faces, synchronized steps, murmured words in an unrecognizable tongue, drifting through the air like smoke. Look at their eyes, she whispered. They're not here. A shiver ran through all 3. They realized the cult had begun taking control of the minds and bodies of the townsfolk. That same night, under the veil of perpetual fog, they saw dozens of hooded figures marching in procession toward the church. They sang in a forgotten language, their voices intertwining in a somber melody that made the very air vibrate. Mateo felt a primal fear, something that neither his logic nor skepticism could soothe. We have to stop them, said Elena, her voice firm, surprising the other 2. How? Mateo asked, his voice cracking. Javier pulled an old reliquary from his pocket, adorned with protective symbols. We're not completely defenseless, but we have to move quickly. If they finish the ritual, we won't just lose the town, we'll lose our souls. From a distance, the sound of an ancient horn echoed, resonating deep within the heart of San Elias. The awakening had begun. The night was at its darkest when Mateo, Elena, and Javier slipped into St. Michael's Church, evading the hooded figures standing guard outside. The old side door gave way with a barely audible creak. Inside, the air was suffocating, heavy with stale incense and the ghostly echo of extinguished chants. Guided by Javier, who vaguely recalled a hidden passage mentioned in the ancient texts, they made their way to the main altar. There, after sliding aside a heavy stone slab, they found a narrow opening spiraling down into the earth. There's no turning back, Javier murmured, lighting an oil lamp. One by one, they descended the icy, slippery stairs, entering a world of shadows and whispers. The air was thick, saturated with moisture, and something else. Something rancid, like centuries-old decay. The catacombs sprawled into a labyrinth of narrow corridors and hidden chambers. On the walls, ancient carvings told stories of angels falling, of blood-bound pacts, of divine betrayals. At the heart of a larger chamber, they found what they were looking for, a grimoire chained to a pedestal of obsidian. The book pulsed, as if it had a heart of its own. "This is the source of their power," Javier said, reverently, yet with fear. "If we destroy it, we can weaken the cult." Mateo stepped forward hesitantly. A voice, sweet, seductive, whispered in his mind, promising knowledge, unlimited power. He staggered back, trembling. "It's alive," Elena whispered, wide-eyed. Before they could decide what to do, a hooded figure emerged from the shadows. It was no longer human, its face a melted mask of flesh, its eyes two pits of nothingness. "Intruders!" the creature shrieked. With quick reflexes, Javier hurled consecrated salt at the creature. It screamed and recoiled, dissolving into black smoke. "We have to hurry," Javier shouted. "We're not alone down here." Gripped by fresh terror, the three friends prepared to destroy the grimoire, while the shadows around them began to stir. Drawing closer, chaos erupted in San Elias that very night. While Mateo, Elena, and Javier battled in the depths above ground, the cult had taken full control of the town. Unnatural lights flashed from the church tower, painting the sky in impossible colors. Inhuman voices chanted ancient hymns, and the streets filled with disfigured figures, twisted blends of humans and shadows. From behind shuttered windows, a few remaining townspeople watched in terror, powerless to intervene. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air reeked of ozone and scorched flesh. Mateo, Elena, and Javier managed to escape the catacombs, but their victory was short-lived. Outside, they were surrounded by cultists, led by a towering figure, Isaac, the former priest, long thought dead. Isaac grinned with a grotesque sneer. "Children of doubt," he boomed, his voice echoing like thunder. "Come witness the rebirth." With a wave of his hand, his followers attacked. Mateo fought with raw desperation, striking and dodging as best he could. Javier, wielding his reliquary and consecrated salt, held several cultists at bay. Elena, driven by sheer survival instinct, bolted toward the church, searching for anything that might give them an advantage. Inside, she found the corrupted altar, where the grimoire had been moved. A circle of fresh blood pulsed with dark energy around it. "I have to destroy it," she told herself, steeling her resolve. Outside, Javier took a deep wound to his side, but managed to bring down a cultist who was strangling Mateo. Both men, bloodied and gasping, saw Elena raise an old iron candelabrum. With a guttural cry, Elena hurled the candelabrum at the grimoire. The impact was brutal. A blast of light and shadow erupted through the church, slamming everyone against the walls. The cultists shrieked, their bodies twisting and dissolving into black vapor. Isaac, roaring in rage, vanished in a storm of darkness. When the echoes faded, San Elias fell into deathly silence. The few survivors emerged trembling from their shelters, staring at a town now devastated, scarred by fire and madness. Mateo, Elena, and Javier, exhausted, wounded, embraced in the heart of the ruined church, knowing they had won the battle. But not the war. Though the grimoire had been destroyed, evil had not fully vanished. Something ancient, something hungry had been awakened. San Elias still trembled under its unseen influence. In the days that followed, the trio noticed the atmosphere had not truly improved. Nightmares continued. Shadowy figures flitted at the corners of their vision, and the whispers never stopped, not even in daylight. Elena, more sensitive to the unleashed forces, began to hear a voice calling her from the crumbling church. "There's something we didn't finish," she confessed one night to Mateo. Javier found the answer in a hidden text retrieved from the sacristy. Although the grimoire had been destroyed, the link to the fallen angels remained. To break it completely, they would need to perform a forgotten ritual: the breaking of the vow. The ritual required three things: the confession of the traitor, the sacrifice of the bearer, and the light of dawn over a purified altar. "Who's the traitor?" Matteo asked, tense. A long silence followed before Elena looked down. "My family," she whispered. "My blood bears the mark of the cult. I am the traitor." The pain in her voice was unbearable. Matteo and Javier exchanged looks of disbelief and sorrow. The night before the ritual, San Elias felt more dead than ever. The few survivors hid behind locked doors, while a macabre murmur floated in the air like an omen of doom. At the appointed hour, the three walked to the ruined church. Javier, his hands shaking, traced a protection circle on the ground, while Matteo held the sacred relic. Elena stood at the center and began her confession. Her words, torn from the depths of her soul, echoed through the crumbling walls. When she finished, the ground quaked, and a deep fissure opened beneath the altar. From it rose amorphous shadows, grotesque figures desperate to stop the ritual. Matteo and Javier fought furiously, using every ounce of faith and knowledge to hold the entities back. With her last strength, Elena raised the relic and slammed it to the floor, shattering it in a burst of blinding light. When the brilliance faded, the shadows were gone. The first ray of sunlight pierced through the shattered ceiling and landed directly on Elena, who knelt, exhausted but alive. The bond had been broken. San Elias, at last, could breathe freely. The sun rose slowly, spilling golden light over the ravaged landscape of San Elias. The fog finally began to lift, revealing crumbled homes, empty streets, and a shattered church that stood like a monument to a forgotten war. Matteo, Elena, and Javier walked through the central plaza. Each step echoed like a heartbeat through the wounded town, a town that had faced darkness and chosen light. Though bruised and broken, they knew their duty had been fulfilled. The few remaining townspeople emerged timidly from their shelters. Their faces held fear, yes, but also hope. The evil had been contained, for now. Javier, leaning on a makeshift cane from his wound, looked at the ruined church with somber eyes. "Everything that was sacred here must be cleansed," he said. "Faith must be reborn, free from the shadows." Matteo stood silently. What he had seen had shattered his skepticism, but it had also renewed his will to protect what he loved. He knew he would never see the world the same way again. Elena, for her part, felt a strange calm. She had faced her inheritance, her fears, and she had chosen the good. Though the scars would never fade, she was free. At the old fountain, where Saint Michael was said to have defeated the demon, the three of them stopped. Javier, with trembling hands, placed the broken relic in the water. A soft light rose from beneath the surface, like a silent blessing. "Let's not forget what happened here," Elena whispered. Matteo nodded. "Nor what might happen again, if we let our guard down." San Elias began its slow rebirth, but in the deepest shadows of the earth, something still whispered, waiting for another mistake, another act of human arrogance. Because some angels, though fallen, never stop trying to fly. What remains in the mist? Years later, San Elias had changed its face. New generations grew up among the restored ruins, unaware of the darkness that once threatened to consume it. The streets were rebuilt, the church transformed into a local history museum, and the horrors of the past became whispers of the old, believed by few. Matteo, now a man of quiet gaze and solemn presence, became the town's school teacher. He taught children about truth, faith, and the importance of well-founded skepticism. Javier, whose health never fully recovered, became the historian of San Elias, the keeper of secrets shared only with those who earned his trust. Elena, after years of fighting her inner demons, found purpose as the town's silent guardian. Every night, she walked the streets, firm, discreet, always alert, always watching. But on certain nights, when the fog grew thick again, when the wind carried whispers in forgotten tongues, and the shadows seemed far too dark to be just shadows, the old ones remembered. They remembered that not everything can be sealed forever, and that, in the deepest corners of the earth, the fallen angels still dreamed of their return. Epilogue. The fog has lifted, but the memory lingers. Years have passed since the night the grimoire was destroyed and the cult was broken, but peace in San Elias is a fragile thing. Children laugh, bells toll, life returns. But the stones remember. Those who survived carry invisible scars. Mateo teaches truth. Javier guards history. Elena watches the night. The church now stands as a museum, its stained glass windows glowing softly in the sun, a symbol of rebirth. But beneath its foundations lie tunnels no one dares to reopen. And sometimes, when the fog returns and the wind speaks in unfamiliar tongues, the town holds its breath, for the fallen still dream in silence, for the forgotten still whisper beneath the earth, and for those who listen too closely, the shadows will answer.
Thank you for listening. The journey has just begun. Until next time.